Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a little while here. We've been doing a little bit of traveling. In case you're curious, yes, I do have a massive sunburn, so RIP to whoever's doing the color corrections on this video. On this channel, we kind of review a little bit of everything. A lot of art house films, international films, and some mainstream films as well. Even recently films like Betrothed from the super indie scene. And recently, in trying to keep with that trend of reviewing a little bit of everything, my girlfriend and I really got into the John Wick series. I was a few years behind on this, and so this video is going to kind of talk about all three, specifically the third movie, which just came out. The short answer is, it's not very good.
I don't know what to say.
So up front, one of the biggest things I talk about on this show is the purpose of a genre. Oftentimes we go to see a movie and we kind of expect what we're going to get. If I see a horror film, I expect gore, violence, nudity. It kind of just goes in part with what that genre is. And I've talked about how horror is a really interesting way to give a body to something that scares us as human beings. How science fiction, for instance, is a way to really take us out of the known world and our familiar surroundings to explore ideas that are existential to mankind. Now, those genres don't have to do that, but it's really where they shine the best. It's a vehicle for those ideas. And when you look at things like comedies or action films, some people do look at those as being lesser than, and I disagree. There's an art form to comedy. There's an art to making people laugh just as much to making people cry or to make people scared. And when it comes to action films, I've really got a love-hate relationship. There are films that I love that are ridiculous, like Point Break and some of the later Fast and the Furious movies, mostly because, as I discussed in Happy Death Day, they don't take themselves that seriously. And they're so bizarre, and the people behind them really kind of care about the project and not necessarily about taking it seriously, that you take that fun away from it. And it's a good way to kind of turn your brain off and just be entertained, and that's not a bad thing. So I'm not going to come at the John Wick series expecting some sort of, revelatory art piece. That said, it had the opportunity to be that. And the first film has 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a film for years I've heard is really transcendent of the action genre. And when it comes to action stars, well, Sylvester Stallone is my favorite of all time, but Keanu Reeves is also right up there. The Matrix is a great sci-fi, but an even better action set piece. And the things that it did to really kind of change how we think about fight choreography is astounding. Point Break, again, is a wonderful movie. Even Johnny Mnemonic. Send your hate to my email, idon'tcare@gmail.com.
It actually occurred to us after we finished this review to point out that idon'tcare@gmail.com is actually not my address, but then I got really curious, whose address is it? So I've done the work for all of us, and I've reached out to them to figure out who that wonderful, magnificent bastard actually is. We'll report back to you with updates.
And with John Wick, people were talking about, again, the choreography and sort of that gun kata, which you kind of saw in Equilibrium with Christian Bale, where you kind of combine elements of karate and kung fu and martial arts with gunplay. And that is something that can be really exciting. Like the Raid films, for instance, are fascinating. And the first John Wick, when I saw it, I was as blown away as I was kind of expecting to be. And would I say that there's a fantastic story behind it? Not really. Like any other film, any other action film, it does have that kind of recurring theme. A person is betrayed, hurt, loses something, and is now on a quest for revenge.
Give me back my son!
In this case, well, somebody killed John Wick's dog, and by God, that won't stand. And it's an interesting film not because of that idea. It's super simple. It's been done a million times, albeit typically with a person and not a dog. And with John Wick, what was so fascinating is the world building. Not necessarily storytelling, but the film had such a deep mythos. There were so many interesting characters and places and plot devices that they didn't feel the need to exposit. What are these weird gold medallions that he's spending? What is the nature of this strange hotel for contract killers? What is happening with these characters and why does it all interplay? And as the film goes along and you begin to pick up on the nuances, it is very rewarding as a viewer. You're learning just as much as you're being entertained. And of course, the action is completely stellar. John Wick 2, I entered pretty excited. It has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. And again, in John Wick 2, the action is fantastic, but you can't help but get the sense that maybe they didn't expect the success of the first movie. The second movie wraps up the plot of the first movie by ending some of the loose threads that were left over and kind of transitions more into what happens next. John Wick 2 for me was a movie where I think you could have cut out the middle hour and you could have not really missed anything from the story. But again, if you come to see the shooting and the blowy-uppy and the stabbing and the punches, sure, it can be entertaining. For me, however, And I've talked about this before, but I want to kind of elaborate on what it means exactly now that I'm finally talking about an action film. I go back to the Avengers, when Iron Man is flying through New York at the end of the movie being chased by alien crafts. All these cars are blowing up from lasers, all these buildings are being destroyed, and I know two things. One, Iron Man is not going to die. The movie's not over yet. You gotta save that for the cliffhanger. And second, if everything is blowing up and there's no stakes whatsoever, nothing of significance is blowing up. So really, I'm just watching some fantastic CGI, and that to me is kind of boring. And when you get into the John Wick franchise, while the choreography is fantastic, when certain scenes get repetitive or go on too long, or John Wick does the same thing to too many people, it just kind of feels like a masturbatory exercise. It kind of loses its charm for me, and unfortunately, I guess that's my shallowness as a film watcher. Getting into John Wick 3, this would become one of the biggest problems. It's been several years since John Wick 2 came out, and if you've seen the trailer for John Wick 3, you know the following. At the end of John Wick 2, Keanu Reeves has broken the rules of the underground confederacy of contract killers and mercenaries and evildoers, ne'er-do-wells, and is now being hunted by everybody who used to be a friend, used to be a colleague, maybe even used to be a lover. And he is on the run. And again, it's only been a matter of hours since the conclusion of the last film, so poor John Wick has now been shot, stabbed, beaten up, and pretty much everything under the sun in the last 2 weeks, and Keanu Reeves looks like he got beat to shit. The issue with John Wick 3 is really where we're going with this story. And in the beginning, for the first act, I was actually really interested. There's a fantastic fight scene with Sixers backup center Boban Marjanovic, whose hand is so big he actually cradles Keanu Reeves' entire head like a baseball. It was kind of interesting. Trust the process. Well, moving on in that, we also had a fantastic knife fighting sequence. And again, it's not really something that I've seen in the John Wick franchise, let alone in film. So watching that, the way they broke that scene down, the diversity of the action was really exciting. And even though it went on for a bit, I was engaged. So all of that is to say, action can be fine. Mindless action can be fine. But really, what are you doing that's unique? And what kind of a story are you telling? How are you using that genre as a vehicle? And that becomes a huge problem in the second and third act. Once John sort of escapes from New York, not quite like Snake Plissken, he goes off on a 45-minute adventure with Halle Berry. And it's fantastic because we've got Swordfish Halle Berry back. You know, that Halle Berry that is trying to be really tough and kind of a badass, but just doesn't pull it off. But you get that for 45 minutes. And also in this movie, dogs bite back. So to all of you who are really disappointed that a dog died in the first one, well, people get their comeuppance in this one. Once that section ends, however, you're kind of left wondering what the fucking point of that was. It's sort of fun watching these events at first, but the fight sequences go on for a very long time. The people who are attacked, the people who are defeated, the exposition with those characters really don't feel that relevant to the overall plot. And had it been some sort of a bridge between the two films, like a short film to hype up the third, it kind of would have made sense because you can tell they want to reuse Halle Berry later, and that's great. But I paid to see John Wick 3. What are we doing for this narrative? And it's kind of the problem with a franchise you can tell is going to go until the monetary wheels fall off, right? What am I actually getting back right now? And what are you just trying to set up for later? And also, how many tickets are you just trying to sell by incorporating more Oscar winners? And you kind of get the same sense with Lawrence Fishburne, who returns for this movie and doesn't necessarily serve a point either. Also, R.I.P. John Leguizamo, who apparently was too busy for this one. The biggest issue with John Wick 3 is that by the end of the movie, two things. One, there were several sequences that I feel just go on way too long, especially where there are certain gimmicks for how John has to fight certain bad guys, like if they're wearing special armor, you've got to shoot them several times to knock them down, you got to shoot them several times to like penetrate the armor, and then finish him off with a headshot. And to me, it's like playing a video game where you're not like leveled up enough, and it's like, I've been punching this fucking guy in the face for an hour, and I'm not having fun at this point. And when it goes on for 20 minutes, it gets a little boring. Perhaps if it had been shorter, those sequences would have been a lot more fun, but the repetition is really a killer. Action's meant to be fast-paced, not just in terms of punches thrown, but also in terms of development and where the story is going. And unfortunately, at the end of the film, when you sort of see where things are left off in the conclusion, you feel like it's really gone nowhere. In fact, I would argue in many ways, and this is not, in my opinion, a spoiler, the film doesn't really progress the story at all. If you had skipped John Wick 3, I'm pretty sure John Wick 4 starts off at almost exactly the same point with maybe a few characters tweaked in terms of where they stand in the universe. Outside of this, I did have several other issues with the movie. And the biggest thing is, from John Wick 1 to John Wick 2 to John Wick 3, that world building kind of went away. There was this wonderful world set up where when you really delve into it, you really need to explain it and explore it more, or at least in this case, the writers seem to feel that way. And that sort of kills the mystique of the universe and raises questions and plot points. Again, Halle Berry is a wonderful actress, and her diversity of roles is really interesting throughout her career, whether it's Bulworth or whether it's, her with Billy Bob Thornton winning an Oscar. Still not sure how that happened. She's had much better roles than that. She's just shown she can do so much. But then in action films like Swordfish and John Wick 3, or, my God, Die Another Day in the James Bond franchise, so bad it actually killed Pierce Brosnan's Bond tenure, she's just not really fit for action movies. And this isn't just with Halle Berry. Asia Kate Dillon, who's in this movie, and for the sake of complete clarity, Asia Kate Dillon is a non-binary actor, and so I will do my best to say they when referring to them, but because I don't script these reviews, I will probably slip up. It's not meant to be an insult. Asia Kate Dillon plays a character called the Adjudicator, who's really the impetus for the majority of the actions in the film. When they come to the hotel you've come to know, the Continental, and they come up to Ian McShane, they basically stipulate, because of your actions in John Wick 1 and 2, you are now being excommunicated just like John Wick, and you have 7 days. With Lawrence Fishburne, because of your behaviors with John Wick, you have 7 days, and essentially you're going to be killed, maimed, whatever. It's left a little bit ambiguous, but you assume that they're going to die. The problem is, when you've seen enough action movies, or just films in general, you kind of get used to certain archetypes, and the Adjudicator is that kind of character who knows a bit more than they're letting on to. They have the backing of an all-powerful committee. They have all of the cards. They know everything that's going on, and there's no stakes for them. And that's fine. That character can work. It can be really ominous, and there are several good examples of that in film. But this character is written a bit tropey. The dialogue is a little bit too, I'm the boss, I know everything that's going on, and I have all of the power. And the dialogue specifically is just a bit cringy in its simplicity. And the delivery by Asia Kate Dillon, and I'm not sure if it's a directing or an acting decision, just really didn't come off. There wasn't really the authority needed for that type of role. And part of that also goes back to the writing, because that character, to be mysterious, to be that powerful, to be that ominous, needs to have less words. And therefore, their words that they do have will have more meaning. And in this movie, they're way too exposed. So that, to me, was just a really awkward, clumsy, and clunky introduction to this film, and kind of a strange way to introduce concepts that they wanted to explore. Now, again, this is a very long answer to answer a very simple question. Is the movie good or not? To me, this is my least favorite movie in the franchise. It also has 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it really goes to ask the question, what does it mean for a movie to be good or bad? If somebody said in a binary sense, is it good or bad, I would say it's fine. I mean, I guess if I had to choose one, I'd say good. It's technically well made. There are certainly good scenes in it. Keanu Reeves, as always, is pretty good, although he just has the worst dialogue. I mean, everything is like, it's not quite, whoa, Keanu Reeves, but it's like guns, lots of guns, Keanu Reeves, and not much else. So that's, you wish he had a little bit more. But again, as far as the stunt work goes and the choreography, that's fantastic. The issue is the minutia, right? If you're going in there expecting action to be entertained, if you like the first two, you'll like the third one. If you're going there because you like the story, which is kind of what drew me into the universe, as somebody who doesn't typically watch a lot of blockbuster action films, you might be like me, incredibly bored and unsatisfied by the end of it. And again, that doesn't make it bad, but it does mean I can't recommend it to many people who don't already go into it with the prejudice of enjoying action films. Is that a proper phrase? Prejudice to enjoy?
I guess so.
Yeah, I'm going with it. We're going with it now. By the way, Angelica is manning the camera today because she's never seen how this works. The prejudice of enjoying an action film or the prejudice of enjoying a John Wick film. If you have either of those, sure, go out, have yourself a blast. To me, it's the kind of movie you go out, you eat some popcorn, you have a beer, and you just turn your brain off. And there is a time and a place for that. For me, however, given how the first movie was set up, I couldn't help feeling disappointed by the second and the third. Unfortunately, it's sort of a victim of its own success. What John Wick 1 accomplished for the action genre kind of doomed the second and third movie. And while there's definitely going to be a fourth, and this is a franchise that's going to continue, it needs to sort of make a decision about where it wants to go. Does it want to continue to do the same thing and sort of incrementally increase the stakes? Or is it just something that's really going to find its own in terms of how hyperbolic and how adventurous and how strange it can be? And you know what? Quite frankly, I wouldn't be against seeing John Wick in space. I don't know where it's going to go. I'd have fun with that. Quite frankly, I still think that John Wick is the reincarnation of Neo once the Matrix shuts down and reboots and they have the spirit of the one still stuck in its mainframe. But that's a video for another day. For now, don't kill any dogs.
Oh, you forgot to mention the Asian guy.
Oh, fuck yeah. You remember the chairman from Iron Chef America? He was also in, I think, Double Dragon.
Mark Dacascos and Alyssa Milano. Double Dragon.
You said it.
He's in this. He's a ninja. So that was kind of interesting. He's not a great actor still, but he had fun.
I don't know what to say. Like, I mean, you see the shit happening, but you gotta act like you don't see the shit.